Unfortunately, we don't have services that they used to have for mentally ill people in terms of dealing with them. And I think the problem here is, I'm guessing the Trump administration was looking for an example. This video was quite disturbing. You have the combination of social media at the same time blowing it up, and so it creates sort of the perfect storm to point to something. Just like when Dukakis, when he was running for president, Lee Atwater took advantage of that one incident that was terrible, that was very troubling for voters once they called attention to it.
So certain people have been looking for an opportunity to find a case like this, to make a point like this. I want to play, this is Charlie Kirk, why he says this hasn't gotten a lot of attention.
A white Ukrainian refugee was murdered just because she was white. Everybody knows that, obviously. If a random white person simply walked up to and stabbed a nice, law-abiding black person for no reason, it would be an apocalyptically huge national story used to impose national sweeping political changes on the whole country. Instead, Megan Basham, no one seems to care when a white woman gets stabbed to the death.
Wow. He said white a lot.
Well, we are talking about it here, so I guess I mean, I don't think that's fair. Look, being in the system, because I have represented people who are mentally ill, and here's the balance. The balance is taking away people's freedom versus evaluating their mental illness. And New York City, there are a lot of programs for people who are mentally ill, but they have to want to be there.
Yeah, and it's
about forcing them to be there.
When you are mentally ill, you have a hard time knowing that you are mentally ill. But also, I mean, people like Charlie Kirk, they've been looking for opportunities to make this some sort of like reciprocal George Floyd situation. And that's the part that I think he's almost giving away the game. And it's sad to see a lot of people going along with it.
You know, let me just say a couple of things. One is, I mean, what happened to that young woman was horrible. And it's everybody's nightmare. If you're in any public space, a subway, whatever, that something bad is going to happen to you or somebody you care about. So it does strike a chord. We don't know why that man did what he did. And for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white, when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race mongering, hate mongering. It's wrong. Then he says that if something like that had happened the other way, there would be sweeping changes imposed on society. Where is the George Floyd Policing Act? It didn't pass. Even when you had a white police officer murder a black man on live television, the whole world saw, there were no sweeping changes. In fact, not one law was passed at the federal level. So I think that's an important thing to point out. The other thing is, you mentioned the thing about cashless bail. I think this is a big challenge that we have. Would you have felt better if there had been cash bail and the mom had come and put down $1,000 to let him out? It's not about cashless bail or no cashless bail. It's about the fact that we don't know how to deal with people who are hurting in the way this man was hurting. Hurt people hurt people. What happened was horrible, but it becomes an opportunity for people to jump on bandwagons. And then for someone like Charlie Kirk, he should be ashamed of himself. No one mentioned the word race, white, black, or anything except him. What people mention is the horror of what happened to this young woman.
Now, joining me now to respond is Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Charlie, it's great to see you. You heard Van Jones. He called you a race monger, said you're the only one that brought up race. What do you say to Van Jones?
Well, first of all, as you aptly noted, that in the video, it's pretty clear that the attacker said, quote, that white girl. Secondly, Van Jones, he puts race in almost every situation where it doesn't exist. For example, with the death of George Floyd, Van Jones repeatedly said that it was a racist attack. You know who didn't say that? Keith Ellison, who is the Attorney General of Minnesota at the time, said that race did not play any role in the actions that happened with George Floyd's death. But even beyond that, and I think this is what's very important, is that we are living in a mental model and a framing post-2020. The 2020 model is that the worst thing that could possibly happen is racial attacks. Remember, even before that, Jussie Smollett or the FBI being mobilized for even the slightest whisper of a hate crime. But now, all of a sudden, when we make the left live up to their own standard of rules, there is complete silence by the entire American media. And then Van Jones goes on television and calls me a race hustler for even calling out the facts and the specifics around this case. Now, this was quite interesting because why is it the media was so quiet on this? You got to wonder, Will, because if the roles were reversed, and I tweeted this out and I will stand by it, if a If a white attacker was minding his own business and a perfectly law-abiding black individual was minding her own business, and that white attacker took out a knife and was relentlessly hacking a law-abiding black girl, you and I both know, Will, this would be national headlines, and there'd be more than 0 headlines, as you pointed out on your show yesterday. And so Van Jones, he wants to keep on trying to find racial motives that they don't exist, and he ignores them when they're in broad daylight in front of him on recorded video and a horrendous attack such as this. The media doesn't care about this, and we should start asking why.
What is the answer to that, Charlie? Why?
I mean, it doesn't fit a narrative. This is my most charitable reading. The narrative that they have pushed forward in the last 10 years is that there is a relentless assault against black people on behalf of white people. And the data does not show that. You brilliantly pointed this out on your program yesterday. In fact, it's the exact opposite. White individuals are actually more likely to be attacked, especially even per capita, by black individuals in this country. The narrative that they have tried to force feed this nation post-2020 is that we are a systemically racist country to our core. We started to say the word racist more. We started to redesign our corporations. We started to teach things in our classrooms that were from the 1619 Project. And all of this has now been met with an appropriate backlash where people said, we're actually not nearly as racist as you say we are. In fact, we're the least racist country ever to exist in the history of the world. And in fact, if you want to actually talk about race-focused activity, why is it that you then ignore all the race-focused activity of black on white crime? Will, I want to live in a race-neutral country. I don't like talking about race all the time. But when I see it and I see the left ignore it and we try to make them live up to their own standard of rules that they force-fed us during the chaos of 2020, it really goes to show the destruction that this can lead to the entire nation. And the final thing I'll say is this, Will, is that this is more than just a semantic argument. This is more than just whether or not it's a race thing or not. Bad policing practices, consent decrees, opening up the prisons. As you say, $3.3 million is an outgrowth of a media narrative lie. So it's not just an innocent media narrative lie. Real policies get put into place when you don't challenge this nonsense in the public square.
That's it. That's very, very well said, Charlie. Race is a part of this story, not just because of the media's lies of omission. Race is a part of this story, not just because of the potential words from the suspect on the light rail in Charlotte. Race is a part of this story because of the policies implemented by a racial lie post-2020. Exactly right. And that's what we need to remember today. Right. These are a consequence of a lie that created policies. Charlie Kirk, well said, as always. Thank you.